Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the topic of men's support systems and the resources available to them.
Yeah, and specifically, we've got two sources that we're going to kind of unpack, and they're coming at it from
Sure.
very different angles.
Yeah.
One of them is looking at specifically Modesto, California, and painting a picture of all the needs that men have that aren't being met.
Yeah, and this is kind of across the board. We're talking about employment, education, healthcare.
Legal and social services.
Yeah, it's kind of just reading through the source material is kind of overwhelming.
It is a lot, and I think the point isn't to make us feel defeated, though, but to really recognize that these needs are very real, they're not being met, and that has real consequences.
Yeah, the source is pretty explicit. Like, if we don't address these needs, we're going to continue to see economic instability, health problems, social unrest.
It's like ignoring the cracks in the foundation of a building.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you look at kind of what they're outlining as the needs, you see some interesting patterns. So, for example, they talk a lot about financial literacy alongside job training, which suggests that it's about more than just, getting a paycheck. It's about giving men the tools and the resources to kind of manage their own finances and create long-term stability.
And it's not all just practical skills, too. I mean, the source talks a lot about the need for mental health services. And, there's the elephant in the room of, this stigma that prevents a lot of men from seeking help.
Huge hurdle. The stigma is a huge hurdle. I mean, think about, a lot of the traditional expectations placed on men. Be strong, be stoic, solve your own problems. And that creates, it kind of breeds this silence around these issues and prevents men from getting the support that they need.
It's almost like they're trapped in this idea of what it means to be masculine, this very outdated idea, and it's hurting them.
Yeah, and that's why I found it so interesting that the source also calls for more targeted programs and awareness campaigns. And I think it's because you need to change the narrative.
Right.
You need to address those harmful stereotypes that keep men from, getting the help that they deserve.
Yeah, and it's not even just about the individuals, right? I mean, the source talks about how addressing these needs in Modesto would have ripple effects throughout the community.
Yeah.
We're talking economic benefits, improved health, social stability.
It speaks to how interconnected all these issues are, right? Like the well-being of men is deeply tied to the well-being of families and communities and society as a whole.
So we've established that the need is there and it's big.
No.
So now let's move to our second source, which is this organization called the Men's Resource Center.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, they're not mincing words.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. It's almost like a call to arms. I mean, it's very strong language. It's almost like they're speaking to men who are feeling lost or disenfranchised. It definitely grabs your attention.
It does. They're definitely not afraid to shake things up, and I think that's why they've been called controversial by some. But underneath this kind of bold exterior, they're making a point that I think is really important. There's no single right way to be a man. And personal growth doesn't come from fitting into a mold.
Right. It's like they're rejecting this idea that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to masculinity, and they're encouraging men to find their own paths to self-improvement.
And I love how they highlight all the different ways they do that in the source. I mean, they talk about meditation and mindfulness, and then fitness, and then even entrepreneurial mentorship programs. Like recognizing that different things are going to appeal to different men.
Yeah, and it's so refreshing, especially when you contrast it with this, traditional and often very limiting view of what it means to be a man. And one of the things that really struck me is their emphasis on vulnerability.
Yeah, they're directly challenging this idea that men should be, stoic and emotionless, and instead they're presenting vulnerability as a strength. They're trying to break down those walls of isolation and encourage men to connect with their emotions and seek support when they need it.
Which is where the community aspect comes in, right? I mean, they talk a lot about the importance of building a sense of brotherhood, providing a space for men to share their experiences, support each other, learn from one another.
Yeah, and I think that's where we start to see some really interesting parallels between our two sources.
Absolutely.
We've got Modesto over here saying there's all these unmet needs, and then you have the Men's Resource Center saying, hey, we're trying to address those needs in this really unique way.
Yeah, and think about what they were saying in that Modesto source about, mental health services and the lack of support that men often face. The Men's Resource Center is tackling that head on.
Yeah.
It's not just about providing therapy. It's about creating a culture where seeking help is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness.
It's like they're trying to address the root cause instead of just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms. And that's what I think is so cool about their approach. They're not just telling men what to do, they're giving them the tools to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, the source uses this phrase diverse approaches, and it's almost like they're saying, here's a toolbox with all these different strategies for self-improvement. So whether it's meditation or fitness or connecting with other men, it's about finding what works for you.
It's so important because what works for one person isn't going to work for everybody, right? We can't just assume that there's a one-size-fits-all solution to these really complex issues.
Right. It's about meeting men where they are acknowledging their individuality and providing them with options that align with their, needs and aspirations.
And I think that speaks to this bigger point that both sources are touching on, the need to shift how we view masculinity.
Oh, absolutely. The Modesto source talks about challenging harmful stereotypes, and then the Men's Resource Center is actively promoting this more inclusive and supportive definition of what it means to be a man.
It's like they're both pushing back against those old ideas that are so limiting and prevent men from getting the help that they need.
And it's not just about, challenging the negative aspects either. It's also about highlighting the positive ones, the strength that comes from vulnerability, the power of connection, the importance of pursuing personal growth.
And that's where I think the Men's Resource Center's emphasis on action is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to just talk about these issues, right? You have to actually do something.
Yeah, the source uses this image of a freight train to emphasize the need for momentum in action. It's about taking those first steps, however small they may seem, towards creating positive change.
And those steps could be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be seeking counseling. It could be joining a support group. It could be just making an effort to connect with other men. It's about recognizing that even small actions can have a big impact over time.
And that ties back to what that Modesto source was saying about the ripple effects of positive change, right? Like when men take ownership of their well-being, it doesn't just benefit them, it benefits their families, their communities, and ultimately society as a whole.
So it's like we start by addressing those unmet needs that we talked about in Modesto and beyond, and then we empower men to take action through organizations like the Men's Resource Center, and then ultimately we create this more supportive and empowering environment for men everywhere.
It's like this chain reaction. That's
Yeah.
a powerful image. And it's a reminder that we can't just focus on one piece of the puzzle. We have to address these issues holistically.
As we've been talking about these sources, I'm struck by how much emphasis is placed on community.
Oh, for sure. Comes up again and again.
Yeah, the Modesto source highlights the need for support groups and community activities. And then the Men's Resource Center is all about fostering that sense of brotherhood.
It makes sense when you think about it, because for so long, men have been told to be self-reliant to solve their own problems. And these sources are saying that's not sustainable. It's not healthy. We need each other.
Yeah, the source actually uses the phrase rallying cry to describe the Men's Resource Center's approach to community building. And I think it's because they're recognizing that we're stronger together, that we can lean on each other for support and encouragement. And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of men.
Yeah.
I mean, they're looking for a sense of belonging, a place where they can be themselves and connect with others who understand their experiences.
And that's where those shared experiences can be so powerful. When men come together and realize that they're not alone in their struggles, it can be incredibly validating and empowering.
And those shared experiences can lead to collective action as well. The source even mentions how the Men's Resource Center has been involved in advocating for policies that support men's well-being.
That's a crucial point. It's not just about individual growth. It's about working together to create a more supportive environment for all men.
And that brings us back to this idea of challenging these harmful societal norms that we were talking about earlier. We can't just focus on providing services and support. We also have to address those underlying cultural messages that are contributing to these issues in the first place.
Right. It's about changing the narrative around masculinity, promoting healthy and inclusive definitions of what it means to be a man.
And that's something we all have a role to play in. It's not just about men supporting men. It's about everyone recognizing the importance of men's well-being and working together to create a more equitable and supportive society.
I couldn't agree more. And I think these sources offer a really great starting point for that conversation. They provide a framework for understanding the challenges, but also the opportunities for growth and positive change.
Yeah, and they remind us that these issues are complex and multifaceted. There's no easy solution. It's going to take a collective effort, a willingness to challenge our assumptions, and a commitment to supporting each other.
One of the things that really stood out to me about both of these sources is how much they emphasize the importance of personal responsibility alongside the need for systemic change.
I see that too. It's like they're saying, yes, we need to address the societal factors that are contributing to these issues, but we also need to empower individuals to take ownership of their well-being.
And that empowerment can come from a lot of different places. Accessing resources, building supportive relationships, challenging those limiting beliefs that they might hold, taking action towards personal growth.
And it's not about blaming men for their struggles. It's about recognizing that they have agency, that they can choose to make positive changes in their lives, even within a system that might not always support them.
And those individual choices, when combined with collective action, can create a really powerful force for change.
So where does that leave us? What have we learned from diving into these sources?
I think one of the biggest things for me is just like how big of a problem this is. We talk about like men's issues, but these sources really show you just how complex it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you said, peeling back the layers of an onion.
Right.
We started talking about Modesto and what guys need there, but we ended up talking about, what does it even mean to be a man these days? It's a lot more than you think.
Exactly. And it really shows you there's not some easy answer. Like, you can't just throw money at this problem or think one organization like this Men's Resource Center is going to fix everything. It takes changing a lot of things, both for individual guys, A&D, like you said, in the whole system.
Yeah. Both these sources are kind of making us rethink what we even think men need. How do they see the world? What's a good life for a guy even look like?
It's like we have to get rid of this one way of being masculine. It's holding men back, and all it does is keep these stereotypes going.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's about seeing how many different kinds of men there are. There's no one right way. You got to let guys be vulnerable and show their feelings and connect with other people.
Which brings us right back to community being so important. It's not just about, giving guys stuff.
Yeah.
It's about making them feel like they belong somewhere, like they're seen and heard and people got their back.
Yep. Modesto talked about needing community stuff, and the Men's Resource Center is living that out. They're all about that brotherhood, sharing what you've been through.
That's something we can all learn from. I don't care who you are. How do we make those places where people can support each other? How do we stop those dumb stereotypes and say being a man can mean a lot of good things?
Starts with noticing what we already believe in,
Yeah.
We all got biases, and we got to work to get rid of them. It's about having those talks that make you uncomfortable, saying those old ways of thinking are wrong, making it so guys feel okay to get help and show their emotions.
And let's be clear. Supporting men doesn't mean you forget about everybody else. It's not about saying one group is more important. We all win when everybody can be themselves and have good lives.
100%. And this makes me think, what stuck with you listening to all this?
Oh, yeah, great question. What really surprised you? Did anything change how you think about this whole topic?
And the big question, what are you going to do about it? Big or small? Doesn't matter. Talk to a guy in your life. Call out some dumb stereotype. Donate to a group like that Men's Resource Center.
Those are all ways to keep this conversation going and to make the world better for men.
Because it's not just about men. It's about making the world better for everybody.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that wraps up our deep dive. Thanks for listening to us go through all this. We'll be back with more soon.
Well, I think what gets me is just how huge this problem really is. Like, we say men's issues, but it's not just one thing. These sources lay it all out.
Yeah, it is like that onion we keep talking about.
Right.
From Modesto, we ended up talking about what it means to be a man in this day and age. Who knew it was so deep?
Right. And the big thing is there's no magic bullet. You can't just throw money at it or say, the Men's Resource Center will fix it. It's got to be a lot of things changing for individual guys and the whole system.
Both these sources are saying, hey, think again about what men even need, how they see the world, what's a good life for them. We got to ask those questions. Yeah. We're so stuck on this one way to be masculine. It's holding guys back, and it just keeps those bad stereotypes alive.
We got to see all the different kinds of men out there. There isn't just one right way. Got to make it okay to be vulnerable, to show your feelings, to actually connect with people.
Which brings us back to community, right? It can't just be, here's some stuff, good luck. It's, you belong here, you matter, people get you, that kind of feeling.
Modesto is saying they need that community stuff, and the Men's Resource Center is doing it. They're all about that brotherhood, sharing what you've been through.
All of us can learn from that, no matter who you are. How do we make those places where people feel supported? How do we stop the stupid stereotypes and show that being a man, it can be a lot of good things?
How to start by looking at what WE believe already. We all got biases in our heads and got to work to get rid of them. It's those talks that nobody wants to have, saying that old way of thinking, wrong. Making it so guys can get help and show their feelings without shame.
And real quick, supporting men doesn't mean you forget about everybody else.
Right.
It's not, this group matters more. It's saying everybody wins when people can be themselves and live a good life.
Exactly. This makes me want to ask, What really hit home for you listening to all this?
Yeah, what stuck with you? What surprised you? Did you change how you think about this whole thing?
The big one is, what are you going to do about it? Doesn't matter how big or small. Talk to a guy you know, call out a stereotype you hear, maybe donate to a group like the Men's Resource Center.
All those things keep the conversation going and help make the world better for men.
Because it's not just about men, it's about making things better for everybody.
Couldn't say it better myself. And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for being with us as we went through all this. We'll be back soon with more to talk about.